other thing is the hem. As a costume designer, you have to like people. You have to have a sense of humor, and you have to have a certain amount of tenacity. And the fourth thing you have to have is a little bit of luck. Hi, I'm Carrie Robbins. I'm a costume designer for the theater. Welcome to my world. I love to draw and I love telling stories. I love the theater. The process of design begins for me getting the job. You get the phone call. If it's a play, you're going to want to read it, maybe a couple times if you have time. If it's an opera, you're going to want to hear it if you don't already know it. If it's a dance piece, whatever they can show you, you're going to talk to the choreographer.
Shalom Aleichem, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Shmoozing with Avi Hoffman. Today's guest is very special. I'm very honored to have her on the show with us. Carrie Robbins' work features 30-plus Broadway shows, including Class Act, the original Grease, Agnes of God, Yentl, with the great Tova Feldshuh, Octet Bridge Club, Sweet Bird of Youth with Lauren Bacall, Frankenstein, Happy End with Meryl Streep, Boys of Winter, Cyrano with the great Frank Langella, Shadowbox, and more and more. She's a costume designer whose awards and nominations include the 2012 Irene Sharaff Lifetime Achievement Award, presented by the Theater Development Fund, 2 Tony nominations, 5 Drama Desk Awards, among others, and her designs have been seen around the world and have included major opera companies as well as film and television. But in 2007, she began to sit down at the computer as a playwright. And in 2014, she produced her first full writing effort, Sawbones and The Diamond Eater, one-act plays about the Civil War and World War II, which were directed by Tazewell Thompson, received 6 nominations from New York's Innovative Theater Awards, which were the most nominations given out that year. Her latest play, which we will be talking about today, For the Lost Children of Paris, takes place in the city of Paris during 1942 to 44. And for those of you who may not know the story, the Nazis, with the help of France's Vichy government, gathered up all the Jewish school children that they could find, took them to the concentration camps. They collected over 11,400 children, of which only 200 survived. Here to talk about her lifetime of work and this incredible new project, please welcome my guest, Carrie Robbins. I could not be more honored to have you on the program. Here we are. How are you? And welcome to Shmoozing with me.
It's been a while since I've schmoozed,
Good. Well, schmoozing is important. We all need to schmooze. We all need a little schmooze in our life. I always like when my viewers can hear a little bit about your background, so we can understand how you were able to accomplish all the great things you've accomplished. So can you tell us, where was your family from? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Your schooling, tell us about your upbringing.
Well, my mom's people were from Lithuania. My dad was from Warsaw. I did not know that. It was a family secret. I'm not sure why, but it was. And I didn't find out until after he passed away at the age of 86. And my mom said, well, I guess it's about time you should see your dad's birth certificate. And so that was how that went. The rest of it, I would have to make up because I really don't know anymore. He was probably a troubled person, but he was a teacher. And I might be the only person that I think, maybe not, who actually lived every day visiting the Book of Knowledge, Did you ever hear that? Or the books of knowledge?
No.
Well, if you didn't have enough money to buy an encyclopedia, which is 20, I guess 26 or so books, you bought the book of knowledge. It was abbreviated, but it would tell you a little bit about everything. And that was fairly regular for me to visit that. That was my father's answer if I asked any questions. I'm an only child. I must have come out of the womb wanting to draw. And here's how I know this. This might be an inappropriate story to tell, but it's the truth. So I'm going to tell you. This is how Carrie drew. And I got it from my parents who told me this. So when I was little, whatever age you are when you're in a crib, do you know what age that is? What age is
Probably
that?
till about 1.5 or 2 years old.
Okay, something like that. And my crib was pushed up against the wall of my little room, which my father had very artfully decorated by cutting out parts of wallpaper and painting them once they got up on the wall in an artistic manner. Then he put up on the ceiling stars. I was born in February, so he put the pattern of the stars with Orion and Orion's belt. There are 3 big stars in Orion's belt. And so I was in a kind of an artistic environment. And then I started behaving badly. This is what my parents said. They didn't know what to do. And it is because if a person likes to draw and a person likes to paint, they need 2 things. They need a surface upon which to draw, and they need material. They need some sort of material which will function like paint or something soft. They could use clay and make things, or they could use something which, like finger paint, could work. And, you know, in a crib, there's not much around. And my parents, coming from where they came from and being somewhat poor, did not believe in gifts of any type, 0. And so I had no medium with which to draw. But being clever, I manufactured my own medium, which allowed me to essentially finger paint. And since my crib was against the wall, I could do whatever I wanted, which I did. My father considered this some sort of aberrant behavior, of course.
Oh.
And he worried about it. And they said, no, bad girl, and all, I guess, the things you say to kids to get them to stop, or to dogs. And it didn't seem to work. Finally, he found that there was a baby shrink, an adult shrink whose specialty was treating babies who had potentially serious problems, which is what I was regarded as. And so they took me to this doctor. I was physically perfectly fine. They explained what the problem was because the whole room was beginning to smell. And, you know, so the doctor said, well, I think I can cure this. And the doctor said, it's nothing bad. It's just that she has an innate urge to draw and paint, and you should encourage that. But of course, it is disturbing the way she's going about doing it. And so he said, get some brown paper. Put some brown paper up on the wall, just tack it up lightly on the wall behind the crib. And then you can buy baby's crayons. They're very fat. The kid can hold the crayon in the hand, buy a bunch of different colors. They are safe and let her go to it. When she fills up the space that she can reach, then you take that down, you put up a new one, and you will have no more trouble. God bless that guy, because he saved me. I think they were ready to commit me. So I went immediately to art school. I think I come from Baltimore, or Balmer, as we say in Baltimore. And so there is a very fine school called the Maryland Institute of Art. Curious title. And I went there as a very little kid, and I started learning to draw in the classic mode from plaster casts. And the plaster casts, anybody who draws out there, you learn by drawing these parts of faces. You learn noses, that's first, and you learn eyes and lips. You eventually get to do a whole face, but and these plaster objects sit on something called a plinth, which I think is a great word, plinth. Anyway, that's how I started off, and I was looking for any field where I could still draw.
Right. So your parents, so your mother was born in America, or her people were from Lithuania, you said?
Her people, there were 6 children, and I never got it straight which. She was right in the middle. And I don't know if she was 1, 2, 3 coming from Lithuania, or 4, 5, 6. I should, we didn't ask many questions there. It was intimidating. My father was definitely from Warsaw.
Did he speak with an accent?
I've always been told that we all have a Baltimore accent. Do you hear my accent?
I don't know enough about the Baltimore accent to recognize it, but you would recognize a Warsaw accent because he would sound like that.
Right. So I'll tell you, all of my life from the time I was born until I left Baltimore, I thought that older people all had a Jewish accent. Because that's all I heard, right?
Right.
So they all spoke with a pretty heavy accent. My grandmother lived with us. My grandparents on the other side didn't live with us, but we went regularly to visit them each week, and they hollered at each other. That's what they
good.
Family secrets, right?
Right. Did your family speak Yiddish at home? Do you remember what your home life was
Not
like?
in front of the kinder. Yeah, it makes me mad because I really wanted to learn Jewish. I do know a few pet phrases that were very, very common, but I believe they're not nice.
Right.
Yeah, but I heard them a lot. I heard "Du Erwachsen wie a Zibbele."
Right, mit dem Kappendreher. Right.
In the Kappendreher, right.
That's right. Okay, good. No, I'm just curious about, did they take you to the theater? What was your first encounter with the arts, other than your own artistic inclinations as a child?
I started out mostly in art, and we were fairly poor, and we didn't do theater. It wasn't until I think maybe a children's movie or two. But it's funny that my father was very theatrical, and he performed a lot around the house. He did excellent recitations, and I listened to something called Peter and the Wolf. I don't know if you. So I learned. But you see, it was all educational. That's what my father said. He said, you have to learn each of these instruments. So bam, ba-dum, bam, bam is one of the instruments.
Sure, Peter and the Wolf is one of the great.
It really is. It's fabulous.
If I'm not mistaken, Theo Bickel, the great Theo Bickel, did a recording.
Who I have dressed, actually.
I'm sorry?
Theo Bickel is one of the people I have dressed. I guess I didn't put his name on a list. Oh gosh.
That's okay, but I love Theo. Theo is one of my dear friends.
I have to talk to the camera. I did a piece with him, which of course I'm sure you'll know, called Three Penny Opera.
Sure.
And it was directed by I believe he was Romanian, and his name was Liviu Chule.
Yes.
I
actually met Liviu Chule. He directed in Romania a lot.
He did, that's right. And he showed great pictures and he was also a designer. He designed a lot of the sets. He didn't know too much about clothes, but he did do a lot of stuff with the sets. And one of the most breathtaking openings of a play that I have ever been involved with, he did. We were at the Guthrie Theater. He was the artistic director of the Guthrie, I think, just for 3 years. And I don't know, his taste, probably being Romanian, was
very avant-garde. I saw several things that he did that were very, very avant-garde.
Oh, I would have loved to have seen them.
Yes.
I just saw pictures. He did show some pictures.
Yeah.
And he was quite nice. When I first was asked to do the job, they said you have to draw it very quickly, because we have our schedule here. We're doing, I don't know, 4 shows, 5 shows, and each must move into the costume shop in a certain manner and have enough time. So you'll have to have the drawings to us. And they gave me about 2 weeks. Well, Three Penny Opera, is a somewhat, I don't remember how many, but maybe it's 100 things. It's not tiny. And I'm slow. I'm just slow because I'm thinking. That's what people don't understand about drawing. The great graphic artist and designer Milton Glaser wrote a book called Art is Work. And he wrote another one called Drawing is Thinking. And a lot of people, they don't understand that. So anyway, I said, I can't do this show because I can't do it in 2 weeks. I can't hit your deadline. And I just can't. And they were very kind. It was actually Liviu, I guess, who thought there was some merit to what I could do and let me have a couple more weeks. And it was I think probably one of the best things I ever did.
So do you remember the first theater piece that you ever saw? Or the first Broadway show that you ever saw?
Well, I didn't see any Broadway, I think, until I got here. So I went first to Penn State University. I picked Penn State because they were the only school that had in-depth programs in both art and theater. I knew I loved the theater. I think because my father performed so much. He was particularly fond of reciting Thomas Paine. So it was he was by profession a history teacher. So I think it would have to have been, the first theater would have been at Penn State. And the first show that they did that I saw was Fantastics. I do remember that. Or I remember the harps, right?
And did you always want to design costumes? I mean, you were drawing. So were you thinking of becoming an artist rather than, when did you suddenly realize you wanted to design costumes?
I will have to reveal a sad truth. I was interested in scenery. It seemed to me more structural, more inclusive of the whole theater event. I don't now necessarily agree with me back then, but that's how I thought then. And I was lucky enough to go to a school like Penn State, who had a wonderful teacher who was the design head and the theater set designer. He designed, I think, many or most of the shows, whose name was Bill Allison. He had graduated Yale, and he decided, I went down to the shop because I figured I could make some scenery if someone would teach me. I could do whatever it took, but I didn't really think of it as a legitimate job, you know, from which you would make money. My father just said, be a teacher because that's reliable.
Right.
So, which many people do think that way. Anyway, and he advised me to go, Bill Allison advised me to come learn to draft, a crucial skill, which I found very interesting. I just like the look of it, the feel of it, the letter forms that you use if you're drafting. I like calligraphy a lot. I brought some calligraphy to show you. It's not mine, but it's pretty terrific. And I really worked, I guess, as his assistant. I designed some shows at Penn State, and I applied under his tutelage. I applied for Yale, because Yale had a good design school. I also applied because another teacher recommended I apply to Minneapolis's, I guess, University of Minnesota, which worked with the Guthrie. And I got in, and I got a scholarship, but that was for acting. And I said, you know, I don't think that's a reliable profession. I think if I could be a set designer, that would be a more reliable profession. You can tell I knew nothing. Right. My mother would say garnished, right?
Garnished.
So I went to Yale, and they felt that women could not be set designers. This was a long time ago, but that's what they felt. And the head of the design department at that time believed in getting rid of most of the women. This was a school policy. If I told you the names of some of the people who they got rid of, you wouldn't believe it, but I'll try one. In my class was a wonderful set designer named Eugene Lee. Oh, Eugene wow. Lee has done, let's see, I'm bad on people's, he did I think the original Sweeney Todd set design. Mm-hmm. He did the original Candide set design, where there's little tables all over the place. And now everybody uses the same idea and thinks that they're brilliant, but he did it many, many years before. But he was so good that he could work professionally. He got other jobs, and they said, the teachers said, you have to come to class. But I'm working professionally. You have to come to class or we'll throw you out. And they did, because he said, no, not doing that. I'm going to do this job. So that shows you. And some other people who you just can't even believe that happened to. Anyway, so I twice was on the cusp of being thrown out. Why? Because one time I designed, I guess they moved me over to costumes first. I have trouble remembering the sequence. They moved me to costumes because the set teacher was very rigid about no girls. Girls can't go into the shop and talk to guys who work with wood and machinery. So, okay. So I switched over to costumes just because I wanted to get my degree. I was there. And it was a whole different field, but I applied the same ideas to that you can use clothing as metaphor to tell you all kinds of things about the actor when he first comes on the stage, even if he didn't say a word, that you would know his mood, that you would know his degree of money, you would know his health, you would know if he's in a good mood or a bad mood, oftentimes controlled subliminally maybe, but controlled by what he has put on that morning.
So Carrie, tell us about how you finished Yale and now you have to get into the business. How did you go about starting in the business professionally?
I was very lucky. In my class, there was a lot of great people, great designer people, and one of them had already gotten himself a job. I don't know how that happened, but he was set to go out to California, and he was going to work with a name you might know, a man named Andre Gregory. So I was lucky enough to meet some wonderful people. They're lifelong friends at Yale. And my friend Steve Hendrickson is a set designer, and he designed, there was a series that ran about 7 years called The Good Wife. So every knob, every window, every piece of furniture, he designed that thing. He is extraordinary. And then he went on to do something, the writers wrote something called The Good Fight, which was another chunk of time. Anyway, he was very talented. He got a job right after Yale, hired by Andre Gregory. Andre Gregory had gotten a commission. This was somewhere after, I don't know if you remember, in California, there was something called the Watts riots. I don't know what started it. I don't remember now, but there were terrible riots. And Gregory Peck, the actor, somehow convinced the Los Angeles, I don't know, the Los Angeles cultural something, that if the children of Los Angeles who were in that neighborhood, Watts, and could do art, could see theater, could make things, could act, that this would be a route to helping these children not riot. And they came up with a chunk of money. They took one of those wonderful old movie houses that are in Los Angeles, in the, my memory is the downtown area, kind of a 1930s, wonderful design. And they put together a company and they hired Andre Gregory to be in charge. If you knew this guy, Andre Gregory, you would know that it's somewhat of a curious choice because he is somewhat avant-garde. He had already been to, I'm trying to remember, some of the most avant-garde of the European style of working. And at any rate, Andre Gregory had done a similar job as an artistic director in Philadelphia. And so he moved to California. He hired my friend Steve, and Steve doesn't do costumes. So he said, he says, I only get as close to the actor as the height of the balustrade. So I will discuss how high we would like the balustrade to be, but that's it. So Steve said, well, my friend Carrie is pretty good, and why don't you take a look at her portfolio? And he did, and I got that job. That was my first job.
Huh. In Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles. And shortly after, we were we were about 3/4 of the way through that season. We started with Tartuffe, and the Tartuffe, a religious hypocrite, was played brilliantly by an actor named Louis Gossett. It might be Louis Gossett Jr. I'm not sure. Who was extraordinary. And we were off to a great start, but somewhere along 3/4 of the way, Andre got offered a Broadway show. And he decided that he had enough with dealing with, when you're the artistic director, you have a lot of jobs to do that might not all be aesthetic, and a lot of dealing with board members and stuff like that, which I think he might not have liked so much. So at any rate, Andre left, and then he asked me to come and do the show with him. It was called Lita Had a Little Swan. We all called it Lita Had a Large Egg. So it wasn't. It was written, I can't even believe I remember this. It was written by a British historian called Bamber Gascoigne. You'd have to really know your British theater history to know that name, but it was such a great name. Bamber Gascoigne, and it was very poorly received, I must say, but they call the great puppeteer Bill Baird. Bill Baird came before Jim Henson, and Bill Baird made charming puppets, and I did my best, but the night before the show was to open, my first Broadway show, the producer called us in. She was a lady producer, which in that time was rare. And we went to the basement of the theater, where there was a table in the center, and piled high on the table were those little Tiffany boxes, which are a kind of a azure blue with white ribbon. I didn't know this at the time, but there were plenty of people there who knew. And she said, I think this show is not going to be successful, and I don't want to ruin my producer's reputation, and therefore I am closing it now. We all went, what? The actors didn't even know. We had no idea. I didn't know you could do such a thing. Don't we have contracts? What? And her name was Claire Nichtern, and she told us that she had just come off doing an extremely successful show, I think written by Murray Schistel was his name. Anyway, she had had a great success with Murray Schistel's previous show, and she didn't want to tarnish her reputation with Lita Had a Large Egg, and so she closed it. That was my first Broadway show.
Wow. So you didn't even, so your first Broadway show didn't even open.
Didn't even open. Didn't even open.
So how did you then get to Broadway? What was the first Broadway show
I
that
guess,
opened?
I have to, I actually have a book that somebody wrote a book about me, and they put a list of all the shows, and I have to go look at it to see how I got from that inauspicious beginning,
Right,
to whatever I did next. I don't remember.
well,
But
you did shows like Grease. I mean, the original
oh, well,
Grease.
shortly after that. Now, Grease, this is the 50th anniversary, by the way, this year of Grease. I'm going to show you something. Wait a minute.
Sure.
So for the 50th anniversary, let's see if this shows.
Yep.
It's a little reflective. This is the cover of Grease, with one of the most famous shots of the first year and the very first group. And John Travolta was not in this group.
Yeah.
Barry Bostwick was
Yes.
other wonderful, wonderful. He was, I think, one of the best of that part. Danny Zuko. But
Yes.
the reason I was in it actually is, and I was in it, got to do it, is the two producers at the time, Ken and Maxine, also went to Baltimore, or came from Baltimore.
Hmm.
And they were, I think, looking for somebody cheap. And I would have worked for free because I loved doing it so much. It's a wonderful process. Don't you think that we go through, anybody who participates, you are a family for that time. And even afterward, you run into the same people many, many times.
Sure.
But Ken and Maxine were attracted to Greece because they felt that the high school portrayed in that world, the world of Greece, was very, very similar to the high school that Ken and Maxine and I and a bunch of other people all went to. And so they thought, well, Carrie knows these people, and they had different names. In other words, the character's name was so-and-so, but we knew someone in our high school, which was called Forest Park High School. We knew someone at Forest Park who looked like that, or who dressed like that, or who talked like that, or to whom that had happened. And she will know all that. So it'll be easier. And I got the job.
Wow. So you have gotten to work with some amazing people. I mean, you know, between Lauren Bacall and Meryl Streep and Frank Langella and Tova Felcher with Yentl and the Octet Bridge Club and, you know, I mean, Frankenstein. I mean, can you tell us, what do you think was your most challenging design?
Well, generally speaking, the most challenging thing is that there are some producers and the people the producers hire to do the budgeting whose eyes are bigger than their stomachs. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
I think the budget should be realistic. I will often reform a budget and make it what I think is sensible.
So you have been a designer for many, many years. And then suddenly in 2007, you decided you wanted to start writing plays. So can you tell us about that transition and the plays you wrote, Sawbones and The Diamond Eater, and how did you get from there to For the Lost Children of Paris, which I really want to have us talk about for a while.
Yes, and I have some pictures. And of course I have some dolls. I guess in about in early 2000, my world was really shook up because my wonderful husband of many years, who was a medical man, came down with a disease that we both knew was untreatable, unresectable, and that was that. And he was a graduate of Harvard, and he always wanted to write, but he was more practical, and his own dad was a doctor. And so he learned doctoring, which he was very good at. And I learned probably more than most people know about certain diseases. But on the side, once he retired, I urged him to sit down and write. And he wrote short stories. That was his format, maybe 6 pages. And literally within, within a year, he was getting them published. I thought it was great because it was really returning to his roots of what he was interested in. And then he got this diagnosis, which he made himself in the length of time it takes to go from where I am on 30th Street to a friend of his who's a doctor who had a test on, I don't know, 80th Street, straight up. And he, while in the cab going up, he worked the algorithm as doctors are taught to do. If it's this and this and this, then it will be either that, that, or that. If it's that, then it's going to be this one. If it's that, it's going to be, and if it's that one, you know, so he had his own diagnosis actually before he walked in the door. He called his friend from here and said, I need a such and such test. And he came back and he said, well, I have the answer. And I said, is it good or bad? And he said, it's worse. Mm. And he told me what it was. And I had, of course, been reading all his stories. And every time he needed an example of the worst case scenario, he would use this disease as what it is. And if you asked, I don't know, 10 doctors, they would probably agree. There's a tiny bit of disagreement, but not much. He predicted his own death within about 11 days. He figured 11 days less. His partner predicted his death in 11 days too, but on the other side, that he would have 11 days more. So these guys, they might not tell the patient because it's very hard information, of course, to take, but they more than likely, they know it. They, 10, 11 days, they know it. So that left me in a quandary. I didn't, my friends thought I should be working, and I did. I did a huge show. Let me see how many costumes that show had, called White Christmas, a new musical at Irving Berlin. Wrote it. It was wonderful. And we did many iterations of it. And it kept me busy. I guess it is a healthy thing, and it maybe had 300 costumes in it. So we did it in LA, we did it in San Francisco, we did it in Boston.
In the White Christmas, we had to make a turquoise paisley because we had two ladies wearing identical sisters' dresses. And Lord help the sister who comes between me and my man. This dress is near and dear to all of our hearts. It's a simple blue paisley, a kind of blue-green. We found 10 yards. The dress takes many more than 10 yards. The ruffles alone take an awful lot of stuff. It's just very dense. And if you know White Christmas and the famous Sisters number, there's 2 of them. And we were doing 3 companies, so there was 6 of them. So we needed upwards of 75 yards. And we ended up with no other option but to make it. We made it in the computer, which gave us the chance to actually print it on the kind of fabric we wanted. So this is a silk chiffon. This is actually a different kind of a silk satin. It's a satiny chiffon. It's still sheer but has a little more body, so the ruffles could be a little bit more perky. And then we were able to actually glue these little sparkly stones on top. From a distance, it's really very magical when the girls move. You catch these little tiny bits of light. This is a Bible. We call it that because it's the most valuable organizational tool that we have. This is a very rough sketch that I was trying to explain the way ruffles go onto the dress, this kind of wave pattern. And here is the shop trying to reproduce that for me. This is the special fabric that we had printed, and another sample of it. And the Bible gives us all of the information where we got the fabric, how much the fabric cost, the trimming or detailing. This is a Xerox of the button we used, so that we have a full record. And if you should have a hit, and if you should be so lucky as to reproduce it, this is the tool you use to reproduce it. We make costumes so that they will last for 8 shows a week, and I'm sure the producers would like those to go a year. So you multiply that out. Now, depending on what the actor slash dancer is doing in the costume and how long he's in it, it might not make it a year. We do replacements, but we make it much firmer, it's stronger. It often has an entire interior to it which can absorb sweat. That takes the edge and protects the more fragile fabrics on the outside. This is a dance dress for a big dance number that our dancing lead has, and we are very lucky. It has 3 different layers of shades. It's an old trick. She does a lot of twirling. She does a lot of what we call Spanish section. Oh, well, that's beautiful. So the colors were very important. Great. What I'm doing in the fitting is I'm making a sort of final adjustments by looking in the mirror to give myself some distance, to give me a sense of the person in the audience looking up. We are so close to being done. It looks fabulous. It really does. And when you twirl around, it's going to be stunning. Yeah. Oh, see, so pretty. Yeah. It's very nice. I don't think we could do better. It's a dress to dance in, right? That's what it is.
So you started writing.
And I started writing. And a lovely actress who just recently passed away, whose name is Cynthia Harris, had a little company. And I told her about this, and she said, well, you know, why don't we try them? We have a bunch of great actors here. Let us read some aloud. You can't tell until it comes out of an actor's mouth, she said. And she was 100% right on that. And so she had a little theater where over on the 42nd Street where that group performed, and they very kindly read a number of my things. And I began to feel, I mean, I also had people who would say, you know, Carrie, writing is actually a very specific skill. Now, if you want to do it, or even if you want to do it based on Richard is my husband, on Richard's work, that's fine. But, you know, there are people you could hire who could help you out. You could tell them the stories and what you want to do, and they could help you. And I said, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. But I would rather struggle myself, you know. And I began to think, as I read some of his material over and over and kind of cataloged them, I began to think, these are good little short stories, but as a play, as a piece of theater, it would be breathtaking, my opinion. And of course, I'm prejudiced, but I think that is true. And I took some classes. There's a lot of things around here that you can participate in, and you can learn stuff. Some of it is useful and some of it is not useful. So I did that. And I began to feel very strongly about this play, The Diamond Eater, because I just had a gut feeling that I thought it was terrific. And it's dark. And of course, my husband had told me, I guess I must have talked this over with him while he was still alive. And he said, nah, this is an idea that's not going to work because it's too tough for the room. And in some cases, and on Sawbones and Diamond Eater, we did have people in the audience. They were looking at the actors like like that. They actually, they were, there are some tough things in the world, and
But that means it was good. That means it was really powerful.
yes, exactly. And those words have been used to describe his work and now my work. So I'm just doing what I think makes sense. I realize now that there is a kind of a thread of things which have to do with the Holocaust. I never really thought of myself as a I don't know, Holocaust-centric person, but it is a topic that interests me a lot. And the Diamond Eater was actually a patient of my husband's, who, when they knocked on his door, the Germans, and came to take him away, he knew he would need something for barter, his life for something to barter. And he was a jeweler, and he reached down to his jeweler's desk, the kind of desk that they work at, and picked up a handful of raw stones. And some people actually stitched their jewelry into the lining of their coats. That was very useless. That was a foolish idea, because
they took the clothing.
And yeah, they took the coat immediately. So, but he had a better idea, and he swallowed them, the Diamond Eater.
Oh.
And because diamonds are the sharpest stone that we have, at least that I know of, if it's at all cut, it will make marks. And of course, it tore up his colon, which was my husband's area of expertise. Hence, the patient, this guy, came to see my husband seeking relief. The patient got out in time. He actually got out of Germany, came to America, lived in New York, lived a comfortable life, except for the fact that he had a cut up gut. And I won't tell you the whole story, but it's still a story of how much people will do for freedom.
Sure.
Are you listening, people in Europe?
Yeah. Well, they're living it now. So when did you learn about the lost children of Paris?
I started writing this story in 2019. A friend of mine, or actually it was a teacher of mine, and I was in a calligraphy class, and we always had a good time. We all loved, and I love R. You're a Robbins. I love R. R is so beautiful. This is how these people are. And she said, so I said, what are you up to? I hadn't seen her in a while. She said, well, her husband and she, who's also an artist, decided to move to Paris for half a year. So after her first couple of years in Paris, I said, so what have you done? What projects? What are you working on? She said, well, I did this and I did that. And she showed me. And then she says, but now I have a wonderful project. This is the perfect thing to write. And I said, so what is it? She said, well, and she told me the story and the numbers that Paris had allowed about 6,000, 6,500 children to go to Auschwitz. And as it spread wider and wider across France, they ended up with that 11,400 number. And she said only 200 made it out, which they know because the Germans keep such meticulous records. And she said, and the interesting thing, the other half of this terrible story, is that there was, let's see, the war ended in 45. So in about 45 and 50, in about 95, the French, or certainly the people of the big wigs in Paris, thought maybe they should have do something about this embarrassment, this problem. It's 50-year anniversary coming up. What could they do? They really felt badly, and they should do something to commemorate. So what did they do? They made plaques. They made, looks like to me, black marble or some other material, and incised in them, à la mémoire des enfants déportés, to the memory of the enfants, to the children who were deported. I thought to myself, deported is not really a precise word. You could say assassiné, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. To the memory of the children, and in my play, I changed it to the memory of the lost children. So they made these plaques, and in each of about 300 schools in Paris, they put that phrase, and they listed each child's name and age. And they put it on outside the entry door of the school on the side. And my friend was walking around looking for something to write. She's probably written, all the major poets. She's probably written most of the Bible, I think. And calligraphers are always looking for something of merit to write. And she sees these lists with à la mémoire at the top, and we shall never forget in French, or we must never forget, I think, at the bottom. And she said, that was it for me. I just started copying down. I saw more schools. I copied the names. I copied the ages. I wrote the thing down, and I am going to do a series on these, and I will treat them more like paintings. And maybe I'll do a book, she says. This is about 10, 12 years ago. So I have it.
Wow. Paris, Auschwitz, remembering the children.
Yeah.
Wow.
And now she, of course, is fluent in French.
But you wrote a play.
And I wrote the play, right.
And you decided to tell the story through puppets.
I did. I thought at first that I was going to tell it by casting children. And I had, actually with my friend's help, there's one French man who discovered, I guess, or got a hold of the various different lists that the Germans had kept of who went where, of which train they were on, which lot they were on, and I have the book right here, and it was 1,800 plus pages. The man said, I am going to, since the Germans gave me all the addresses, of course, a lot of the houses were no longer there, but even the Germans even wrote down if there was a living grandmother or grandfather. He wrote it down, and it was on the manifest. So this one man and his wife contacted every single name and said, please send me, I'm going to make a memorial book for the children. And I want you to send me any visual, any picture, even if they were like it was 4 years before or 8 years before, anything that is the child who can no longer speak. And I'm told by my friend that she talked to this man. He's still alive. He must be quite old. But she says he is still getting pictures.
Wow.
Still getting pictures.
So can you summarize quickly, since we're over an hour already?
Oh my gosh.
But I'm so
sorry.
fascinated. No. I am fascinated by all this. Can you summarize the plot of the play and show us the puppets that you have and how you want to tell the story?
The plot is really my musings of how the Germans pulled this off. So they walk into a kindergarten class, and do they come in with soldiers and guns? And then all the kids scream, and they what? Shoot them there, or they make the soldiers pick them up and throw them into a I don't know, a vehicle with blackened windows? How do they do that? I think in the beginning, 42, they were more careful. They were more manipulative. For example, in the book, there's 2 sisters, or in another piece of research. Anyway, I was drawing 2 sisters, and they had shoes, which we in the costume business called peep toes. You know, the toes are sticking out. It was a fashion that was very big in the 40s. And I looked at the picture of the 2 sisters, clearly sisters, with the 4 feet and the 4 peep toes. And I saw that the cut, the peep toe is a certain shape, which I know. And this was ragged. The cuts were ragged. So what did it mean? It meant that these 2 girls had shoes that no longer fit them. And they didn't have the money, somewhere in 42, 43, they didn't have the money to go buy another pair of shoes. That would be impossible. So they kept cutting as they grew. So anyway, I would do about 3 pages drawing a day. It was horrible. I couldn't do it. It was so depressing. I said to myself, I don't think I can make a play of this because I can't have children. From there, realizing that I couldn't cast children, and some people disagree with me, I moved to the puppets. And I'm thrilled because something about, you know, a puppet can say things that a regular person can't say. A puppet can be very fresh. You know, if you look at the history of Punch and Judy, and you see Punch is, you know. Here's what I did first. As I began to conceive, how would somebody do it? So I drew this. These were 4
Beautiful
little kids that began to have personalities to me in that class. The one with all this hair is this one right here. All that hair. And into the classroom comes this lady. A knock at the door of the school. Let's see. Yeah, that lady comes. Here is a close-up of her. And she is a lieutenant, and she is there to tell the children, some of the children, that because they are such smart little Jewish children in that class, and we all know that Jewish children are always the smartest ones, right? Because they are so smart, they are going to get a reward. And only them, well, they're very thrilled. What is the reward? The reward is They are going to get a train ride. Well, well, there's a lot of excitement in the class and a little bit of jealousy. But so she says, get your coats, get your hats, get together. And I'm going to take, the teacher has a problem with this. Although I think it's not clear at that part of the play what the teacher is thinking. But the children are taken off, and the long and the short, they all put on their coats. All these children
Right.
are wearing real clothes from 1940s.
Wow.
And they're real, I don't know if you can see them, they're
Real
real
shoes.
shoes.
Wow.
These are actually Buster Brown, so they are American, unless a Buster, look at those shoes.
Right.
If you know anyone who collects shoes and has them, I'll take them.
Wow.
And they are put into what's called a Berlin flyer. Back in the day, you might know it's a kind of a wagon. And they are taken to the waiting train. And there was an indoor, in Paris, there's an indoor bicycle competition. And that's where all the Jews were put while they waited for the train.
Right. Drancy. Yes.
Is that what?
Yes, they were all taken to Drancy. Yeah.
It's just all so awful, really. Well, the little kids are not dumb. They're Jewish kids. They're not dumb. And they get to, in the play, they get to the train, which is in fact a boxcar. And I assume if you know the structure of a boxcar, you know, there's no windows in there. And the little boy, Jacob, says, I'm not going in there because I don't see any windows and I don't see any lights. And the whole point of a train, there's not even any chairs. You have to sit next to a window in a train. Come on, all right? And the lieutenant lady is not pleased with this. The long and the short is that we don't get to see what happens, but it's clearly inferred. And I have a wonderful friend from Israel who plays the saw. And the saw is a beautiful instrument that people say is the closest to the human voice. And she will play the saw. And we actually read many of the names from the scrolls. So I can't say it has 100% happy ending,
Right.
but one child does survive.
I cannot wait to see what it turns out to be. I couldn't be prouder to introduce our audiences to you and the project. And we will provide everyone with information about how they can support you and the project. And
Thank you.
we will someday figure out a way to make this come to fruition. So Carrie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your life with us. I'm so impressed and I look forward to hearing more. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for spending this hour with us and Carrie Robbins and this wonderful project for the lost children of Paris. Thank you.
I'm going to get a puppet and bring him close to the camera for you.
Okay.
And you can run credits while you're doing it.
There you go. So while we're running the credits, thank you all for watching, and please stay tuned, for more of our programs at whyilovejewish.org. Oh my God, look at that. It's like right out of Harry Potter.
Yeah, right.
Oh my God.
And these are vintage.
And I happen to know a lot of puppeteers, so we'll.
Do you really?
I do.
Oh,
Sesame Street.
Excellent.
People, yeah, a lot of great people.
I could use some puppeteers, that's for sure.
Then we'll talk.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie.
Say
Bye-bye.
goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.